Now, after leading a huge multi-country yoga celebration at the UN headquarters in New York, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is now in Washington, D.C. It's a packed schedule for him on Thursday. He is set to hold bilateral talks with President Joe Biden, address a joint session on the U.S. Congress, and also attend state dinner at the White House. The U.S. capital city has rolled out the red carpet for Prime Minister Modi. President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden welcomed the Indian Prime Minister at the White House. Biden is aiming to tighten his relationship with the leader of a nation seen as a pivotal force in Asia for decades to come. The pomp-filled state visit marks their 10th meeting since Biden came into office. The Bidens hosted a private dinner for Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the White House, and Washington wants New Delhi to be a strategic counterweight to China and sees India as a critical partner. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is seeking to raise the influence that India has on the world stage. Just on Thursday, Prime Minister Modi will be welcomed with full military honours at the White House. He will then hold the crucial bilateral talks with President Joe Biden, after which the two leaders are expected to address a press conference and take questions. In the evening then, the Prime Minister is scheduled to address the joint session of the U.S. Congress. He is the first Indian Prime Minister to do so twice. The Prime Minister will conclude his day with a state dinner at the White House hosted by the Bidens. Let's now take you through the likely deliverables of this state visit. Quoting sources, news agency Reuters stated that U.S. is set to ease visa for skilled Indian workers as Prime Minister Modi visits. The State Department could announce that some Indians and other foreign workers on H-1B visas will be able to renew those visas in the U.S. without having to travel abroad. Indian citizens are by far the most active users of the U.S. H-1B program. They made up 73% of the nearly 442,000 H-1B workers in fiscal year of 2022. On the agenda of the state visit is expanding bilateral cooperation in the defense industry and high-tech sectors. India is expected to get access to critical American technologies that Washington rarely shares with non-allies as well. A deal for General Electric to produce engines for fighter jets on Indian soil is also on the cards. Another expected announcement is India's purchase of 31 armed MQ-9B Sea Guardians drones made by General Atomics worth $3 billion. The world's two largest democracies are also likely to make announcements on climate. It's an area where there have been varied opinions on the responsibilities of developed versus developing countries. On June 23rd, the Indian Prime Minister will be hosted by U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris and Secretary of State Antony Blinken. The U.S. companies are welcoming Narendra Modi warmly. American firms are planning new investments in India, the fastest growing G20 economy. Narendra Modi will also address U.S. CEOs at a Friday reception. The India-U.S. bond is underpinned by not just global politics, but also business and economics. Trade between the United States and India in 2022 climbed to a record $191 billion. The two nations have launched a collaborative technology initiative with eyes on future development. Washington and New Delhi have been moving closer for over 2 decades now. Successive U.S. presidents have displayed bipartisan support for stronger ties with the emerging Asian economy and also a regional power. President Joe Biden has built on that legacy and also expanded cooperation to the global world. Now, as Indian Prime Minister holds talks with U.S. President Joe Biden, a new era in the Indo-U.S. ties is poised to begin. During an interview accessed by WION, members of House of Representatives Ro Khanna spoke on what is expected out of this meeting. He also spoke on how India is fast emerging as a bright spot for making investments in the technological sector. Take a look.
Several dozen of your colleagues wrote to the White House urging them to reconsider this meeting with Modi. Do you think it's going to affect any of the deliverables this week?
The president is committed to a very strategic partnership with India. He's going to talk about the defense relationship, the technology relationship, the economic relationship. Of course, we're going to talk about the importance of human rights, of a free press, of the nation's commitment to liberal democracy. But the core of the meeting is going to be how do we strengthen the partnership.
How is India uniquely positioned to, capture some of the technology investment?
Well, the world is very concerned about not having a hegemon in Asia and not having China be too dominant. And so India provides an alternative with a liberal democracy for the free market economy. And you're seeing companies like Apple now move manufacturing into India. India has a chance of becoming the Asian hub for a lot of advanced manufacturing as we see a move away from China.
Somebody who represents Silicon Valley, you're uniquely positioned to see that. What are you hearing from some of the company leaders and some of the global technology company leaders?
I'm hearing that there's a diversification effort. There's not a complete break from China. That's unrealistic, and that would really dramatically lower GDP. But there is a view that we shouldn't have all of the eggs in the China basket, that we have to diversify our supply chains. And India is an attractive candidate. But we have to make sure that we continue to not take that for granted, cut through some of the bureaucratic hurdles, make sure that there's transparency and not corruption, make sure that the U.S.-India economic partnership is strong.
Now, joining us from the ground is our principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibul, joining us live from Washington, D.C. Siddhant, it's pretty early in the morning. Good morning to you. How is the day looking for Prime Minister Narendra Modi in terms of diplomacy?
Well, it's just past 5:30 a.m. EST local time, and it will be a pretty long day and pretty intensive day in terms of engagement. The day starts with the Guard of Honor. Then, of course, we will see the bilateral between Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the U.S. President Joe Biden, followed by a press conference in which both sides will be taking questions as well. Then we all have to, whether it's the Indian Prime Minister's delegation or the media personnel who have come to cover the visit, to rush to the Capitol Hill, where, of course, he will be addressing the U.S. Congress. Each and every word will be weighed, whether it is India-U.S. relationship or whether it is how India looks at relationship with Russia. Now, he is the second Indian Prime Minister to address the U.S. Congress, so that is the significant milestone as well. And the day ends with a state banquet which will be given in the honor of the Indian Prime Minister. It's a very rainy day, let me tell you, on the ground, and pretty windy day as well as it was yesterday, but essentially a lot of hopes, expectation for a day that will set a new milestone in India-US relationship as both cement their relationship. This is an official state visit, so essentially we will see the highest level diplomatic protocol being extended by the Biden administration to the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Right, Siddhant, now let's focus on the bilateral meeting that is going to take place between the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Joe Biden. China is going to emerge, of course, one of the sticking points in the meeting. We, in fact, just heard Ro Khanna, one of the member of House of Representatives, say that the aim is not to distance and cut off China, but to find a strategy to deal with China and its hostilities being posed in the Indo-Pacific. What can you tell us on that front?
Well, when it comes to China, both India and United States are aware of a rise of a very aggressive China. They, of course, are concerned about a China that can destabilize the wider Indo-Pacific region. And essentially, when it comes to China, both sides are looking at two things. One, of course, is the diversification of supply chains, something that both sides have been emphasizing since the COVID pandemic, because the supply chains look very dependent on China, and with China closing down, it impacted the global economy, it impacted the global system, as well as many supply chains were massively and abruptly disrupted. The second is economy-wise. Now, decoupling is something we all have heard, and most of the countries do want decouple with China. They do want to get decoupled with China, but it is not very easy. So all of the countries increasingly, including India and the United States, have been calling for de-risking their economy from China, not being excessively dependent on China. China is one of the largest trading partner of India, despite the border standoff. Same goes for the United States and many other countries. So largely that remains a priority. And both sides, India and the US, want to increase their trading relationship. It's already a very substantive trading relationship. US is India's largest trading partner, and focus is how relationship in terms of trade, in terms of investment can be increased further. And we will get to hear a lot about it all throughout the day. And as the day ends with a state banquet, let me tell you that state banquet is given in the honor of a visiting leader for a state visit, and this is the third state banquet which Biden administration is going to give. And the last state banquet went up to 1 a.m. in the morning for the South Korean president. So you can expect we started the day very early. We're going to end the day very, very late.
Absolutely. A very, very long day awaits you, Siddhant. We wish you well. Thank you for getting us all those insights from Washington, D.C.